And we're live. Today is going to be one of those Bitcoin and behavior episodes. As many of you know, I've been really enjoying observing and digging deeper into the personal changes that result from engaging with and learning about Bitcoin. I think it's probably one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole phenomenon. And I have Bang Bitcoin with me here today, who's going to remain anonymous to share some of his thoughts and some of his story. But first, do want to thank the sponsor of the show, the Bitbox O2, Bang, right there. Bitcoin only edition for myself, of course. And yeah, this is a great hardware wallet. I'm advising a lot of people to buy Bitcoin now and have been for the last several years. And the more complicated step is always telling them how to secure it and take custody for themselves, because that is a crucial aspect of buying and owning Bitcoin. And I've been really enjoying playing around with the Bitbox O2. It's a super smooth, easy to use hardware wallet. I've even gone full psychopath and cut out tiny little seed words so I can randomly select my own seed phrase, because the wallet allows you to do that. You can, of course, roll it, and it, of course, generates it for you as well if you prefer that approach with a random number generator. It connects to your own node. It has coin selection, a lot of great features. And I found it's good for someone with more experience that wants to do multi-sig stuff, as well as someone who's just dipping their toes into this whole world. So thank you to the Bitbox O2 for the support. And if you guys want to check it out, go to shiftcrypto.ch/rapid fire for 5% off. Bang Bitcoin, what's up, baby?
Hey, John.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good, man. It's good to talk to you. I've been listening to you for a while, and so it's pretty cool to get to meet you and have this chat.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this too. We've been going back and forth on DMs on Twitter for a while.
Yeah.
And you've always got enthusiasm and things that you want to discuss. And I thought, now that I'm trying to do a more of a dedicated series or approach to speaking to people that have a particular story to share with regards to Bitcoin and how it's changed them. I thought now was the time to put this thing together. So I know you're obviously maintaining a certain degree of privacy. So how do you want to kick this thing off? What's top of your mind?
Well, I mean, first I want to say, it's just fucking cool what you're doing. I mean, that's kind of like the first thing. It's a weird thing to reach out on Twitter to somebody you don't know. I mean, it's even weirder to listen to people, discuss things, and then get the sense that, oh, like I would get along with that guy. Like I want to meet that guy. I love I love your show and I love what you're doing. And so I just sort of had this sense of like, I want to reach out to you. And it's weird to reach out with somebody you don't know, but, I don't know. I guess I try to live like instinctually and just trust my instincts. So yeah, that's why I kept badgering you basically.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And that's the cool part about being in Bitcoin, like I don't want to suggest that we're all the same, but we are operating on a similar wavelength, so it makes it that much more easy. Like I've done a bunch of these things now where, we haven't talked before, and here we are, striking up a live stream. And just the fact that I can have the confidence to do that and think that, the conversations are, best case scenario going to be interesting, but even just not a complete train wreck is kind of a miracle in itself. But it just speaks to like how I guess how aligned or how the Schelling point of Bitcoin that's bringing a lot of similar people together and changing people in a lot of similar ways, so that I think we can jive so easily and so so seemingly randomly.
Yeah, there's definitely something going on. It's pretty undeniable. And yeah, I mean, you can see it. I mean, you can see it now seeping everywhere into the mainstream and whatnot. And I mean, I just jumped onto Twitter in the last 6 months for the first time. It's really my first foray into any social media whatsoever, is being on Bitcoin Twitter, and I just gotten so much out of it already. It's just really cool.
Yeah, well, this is, we were talking about this very briefly before we started, and it's in my opinion, it's a genuine culture that's emerging, and it's very early stages, and the ideas and the ethics and the, all all the different elements of the culture are still swashing around and being sorted out. But like, I think it's pretty clear if you step back from it for a second that it's certainly a counterculture. And, I think many Bitcoiners would argue on its way to becoming dominant culture at some point in the future. And here we are all contributing to it and figuring it all out and experiencing changes within ourselves and throwing them out into the mix. And, on this fairly rapid, I would say, process of refining our understanding of what this all is, and also contributing to it becoming something that, we have a vague idea of what it's becoming, but really not a super clear one.
Yeah. I mean, my beginning into this was like early 2017. And I mean, the reason why it's like, I'm not technically savvy, although I'm getting better, and I'm pretty, stoked about how intimidating it is to like dive in there, but, get in there. So now I'm running my own node and got my own multi-sig thing going, and it's just awesome. I guess confronting the fear of the technical for me. But when I started, the thing that drew me in so much was the people. Like I guess I won't say I pride myself, but I think one of the things I've always relied on in my life was my intuition about people. And I kind of, it was kind of used it to, I guess, make my way in some ways. And when the seed was sort of first planted, I mean, the questions were in my life for a long time about money, and they were just kind of whispers, they were just whispers, and then they just got louder and louder. And when I then dove in and this thing, I mean, I can tell you when I first heard about Bitcoin, like the moment I heard about it, like something went bing. Like, and it's weird. I was watching those, they're a little bit overproduced, but those Mike Maloney videos on the hidden secrets of money or whatever. And towards the end of one of the episodes, he sort of says, he's sort of asking the questions. What will it be? It could be this. It could be that. It could be this new thing of Bitcoin. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, there's something there, like immediately. And so I dove in and just started to research as much as I could, I mean, in 2017, there wasn't nearly as much as there is now 4 years later, but it was out there, there were people still doing stuff. And yeah, and like I said, the thing that drew me in was when I listened to people talk, like from the Bitcoin space, people that had conviction about Bitcoin, I was struck by how many people were highly intelligent, but also like not like, it's like the difference between like intelligence and over analyzing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a highly intelligent component to the people in the space, but they're also very human and grounded, and the intelligence has a wisdom to it. It's not just a knowledge. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and I think there's so many examples of, so many people coming into the space now, of course. And I think there's a lot of examples where that's not present or that's not the case, right? There's a very narrow knowledge and perhaps an extreme intelligence, but which lacks the broader wisdom to assess what's going on properly.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. It's such a phenomenon that you come into a space where, and I usually term it, I don't use the term wisdom, although it's perfectly reasonable in, that you're using it. I usually just use the term clarity, right? Like I think intelligence is one thing, but having like a broader clarity of perspective about how all the pieces of the reality puzzle fit together. And, of course, none of us have a full picture of that, but I do think Bitcoiners have both like, highly specific, like domain expertise on the one hand, but it coincides with a broader clarity of perspective that allows them to kind of understand how their expertise fits into the whole, and how to juggle the two almost most optimally, or certainly more optimally than it seems like a lot of people in the broader society, in normie world seem to do.
Yeah, and I mean, to this day, I'm still struck by it. Like, I'm just struck by the number of people and the new influx of people that are just bright,
Yeah.
like bright people, and they're inspired, and they're working their asses off for Bitcoin. I laugh to myself sometimes because I think I'm just so damn lucky, because I'm like, I think to myself, like, every time I buy Bitcoin, it's like all these people, like there's an army of people making Bitcoin better. And every time I buy a little bit, it's like I benefit from, this just, yeah, it's an army. And it's the kind of people that I just dig, like, people that are ballsy, intelligent, but still human about the whole thing. And like you said, yeah, broader context, the philosophy, and just all of it is just so.
It's very unique, and one of the things that I love about it too is, Bitcoin is a proposition of principles, right? Like it says, like, here I am, this open, decentralized, immutable, censorship resistant, honest, fair, meritocratic system,
Yeah.
right? Do you accept me? Sort of thing. And if you're someone that says, yes, I accept you, I accept these rules, I accept these principles, I think they then, almost necessarily impact people with similar, or almost imbue people with similar principles if they decide to accept them. And so, that's one of the things that I love so much about this space. And obviously there's exceptions, but it is a principled behavior, right? It is principles of honesty and integrity, and truthfulness, right? And forthrightness, like,
Yeah.
and many more. And those are wonderful things that you don't see in many places today.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it's incredible that it's originating with a protocol. Like to me, it's mind-boggling, that a piece of software is, an open source piece of software is out there working, doing this thing. And yeah, like, to your point, it's like, I mean, sometimes when I sit back and think about it, it's like this machine that just, the block after block after block, and it's just this assertion, or this, like, it's like a yes and a no. It kind of reminds me even of the computer, the on off, the ones and the zeros. It's like, it's a yes, yeah, this transaction, it's legit. It's like it's a constant sort of like heartbeat of, like, this is the truth, this is the truth, this is the truth. And as you keep bouncing up against it, yeah, it's just wild what happens. Like, I don't know. I don't know exactly how it happens, but there's something about it, that the heartbeat of the Bitcoin blockchain is just like, the truth of it just starts to, like, I don't know. I'm moving my hand here, just kind of like boom, 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 like a heartbeat, and it is a frequency, and it does. It just starts to impact you. The more you bounce up against it, it's not changing. It's doing the same thing again and again and again, and the more you bounce up against it, it starts to affect you. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think it has an interesting propensity also to, we say this a lot in the space, and a lot of people not in the space probably don't understand what we mean, but that it kind of reveals the truth about people. And I think just an aspect of that is that its proposition is so bold and bare, right? Everything I just articulated about the openness and the fairness, like, that's what it's proposing. And if you agree with that and you integrate it, then that says something about you, right? If you resist it and you criticize it and you decry it, well, that says something about you too, right?
Yeah.
It's like the judgment that can't be escaped, right? If you even come within, if it enters your awareness, or if you come within its domain, let's say, it's almost like you're necessarily judged by how you interact or don't interact, how you engage or don't, how you criticize or praise, like, because it is those unchanging principles. So the only thing that can really be assessed for reaction is you. And it's and we see this playing out all the time, right? We see new people come in, and the culture that's grown up around that fundamental proposition is obviously an extension of that. And so that's the cyber hornets, right? That's people that kind of are the active principle of that judgment, of those principles inherent in that system. And maybe sometimes they go in the a little bit overboard, but I actually don't think that's the case. I think my observation of a lot of people say toxicity, right, which I actually entirely reject. I think it's a playful test of character, because I know a lot of these people and obviously have interacted with them a lot, and they are happy, playful, loving, supportive people a lot of time, imperfect of course, but when people come in and it becomes evident that there's a conflict between them and, let's say, the system, as odd as I know that sounds, I think the hornets, the immune system, just kind of poke and prod to try to reveal more of the character of these people. And you may not like that that's the case, but again, I do think a culture is emerging here, and it only makes sense that the culture at large and the participants within that culture would want to understand deeply who's coming into it, right? Because there is an ethic and there are principles that permeate that culture. And I think that response is perfectly natural. Apply a little pressure and see what's revealed about the character of people that are presuming to enter it. And we know how that plays out. If you come in with humility and a desire to understand the truth, and not taking yourself too seriously and a playfulness, then you're going to be welcome with open arms, and you're going to be subsumed into the culture, almost immediately. But if you resist, or if you have arrogance, or you lack humility, or you presume to know, fill in the blank, then you're going to probably continue to get pressed and prodded and poked. And how you respond to that is very telling. And, there's been some funny instances of that recently with Lex or Eric or whomever. But
it reminds me a bit of the great stand-up comedians, where they it's like they push and they poke and they push, and they do it to see like how will you respond, like how will you respond to what I'm throwing at you. And like you said, it reveals, right? It's a bit of a mirror. And it's very cool to see. Yeah. I mean,
I love it.
I do too. I mean, I'm with you. The Hornets, it's like, there's sometimes where I'm like, oh man, did we just do that? And I'm saying we, because I feel such a, I don't know. I just feel a union with this, did we just go there? I'm like, okay, let's see what happens. Let's see.
It's so, it's so ridiculous sometimes, but that's the beauty. Like, that's the beauty of fuck you, right? That's saying like, it's almost a test to see if you can really, see the truth behind the action, right?
Yeah.
Like, and to realize that these are people who don't care about your opinion, but who are willing to engage with you and interact and even develop strong relationships with you if you accept that premise, that they can do what they want to do and you can do what you want to do, and the system treats everyone the same regardless. And
it's very human, and I think I actually think it's really important, because especially now, in the world that we're living in right now, it's so important for people to be challenged on what they hold to be sacred. It's so important, because there is an elevated sort of level of quote unquote sacredness, to so much of like our society right now. And it's so important that there are these gatekeepers that are always bashing it down, like breaking it. And because if we get too obsessed with these ideas, like with ideas about things and identifying with things, it's dangerous, and it's so important for people to, it's so important to have this immune system that kind of attacks in a way. If you can attack, if you can keep attacking things, to kind of reveal their essence, like really reveal their essence, because, we're complicated things, we have all these ideas about things, but really, and that's why I love Bitcoin so much. It's like first principles. Can you go back and see what's underneath it, and then what's underneath that, and what's underneath that, until you can distill it down, but, all too often in the world, I think, especially, whatever, I don't want to be negative about anything, but I'm not a fan of, like, a lot of academia and stuff like that, where it's like there's an obsession with kind of like overthinking, overanalysis, identification with ideas, as though, there's some ideas that are the most important. And yeah, I just like when people can find a deeper truth. Like,
Yeah.
and if you find a deeper truth, or feel a deeper truth, then you don't get shaken out, right? Like, people can come at you with stuff. The hornets can attack you, but if you feel strong about what you know and who you are, it's not going to bother you that much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally. And I think that's part of the reason why Bitcoin instills such confidence in people. It's because, like, for all the benefits and new novel behaviors that it permits, the protection of your money, your savings, your sacrifice, however you want to characterize it. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you about it. Right. And I think, that gives you a confidence to go into the fray, go into the melee, and just, try stuff, test stuff, propose stuff, smash ideas together, assert yourself, withdraw from it, because, like, none of those barbs, none of those attacks, if they even are, truly attacks and not playful sparring, none of it matters. You're still good.
Yeah.
Right. So to have that confidence, I think that, that's what's required to pursue truth, almost, right? Like, you have to have, like, some kind of an anchor. And I think that Bitcoin is providing that for people, to allow them, the whole idea of becoming uncancelable. And of course, most people are yet to be completely uncancelable, but the fact that you're sovereign over your money is, like, the major step, right? And once you have that established, I think people are finding that elements of their personality, or even, just, it's giving them an opportunity to ask deeper questions about themselves, and then have the confidence and freedom to actually begin expressing those things, whether it be in their personal life or their career, or wherever, and trying to, continuing and perhaps even accelerating that journey of understanding themselves, and becoming that person that maybe that previously they thought they wanted to or could be, but were inhibited in some way, or discovering that, there's a whole new person that they didn't know they could be, that this is giving them, this is empowering them to be able to strive for in a more confident or more effective way. And and I think it's all because that kind of one little seed of confidence and sovereignty is bleeding out into all these other areas.
100%. And of course, it's done with such, incredible irony and humor, like this, the meme lords, right? I mean, it's just incredible. And the meme of, like, fuck you money, like you said, F you money. It's like, I mean, the word that comes to mind is, when you distill it down past the humor and the meme of it, it's like, the word that comes to mind is, like, agency. And it's just such a powerful force, because it's at the heart of everything that gets built. Like, everything that gets built by humans is about, a human being sensing, oh, I got something. I want to put it out there. I want to make something, and yeah, there's something that happens when you sense that the value that you have, that you create, is yours. Something happens, and like you said, for me, it's like agency emerges, and then a person starts to feel more confident, more able to sort of plumb themselves for, like, who am I? What is this? What am I doing here? What am I gonna do? Is there something that I really want to do versus, you know, um, this other thing, which is like, there's a system that I got to game and I got to play some kind of a, game to win this game that doesn't feel right to me to play anyways, but I guess I'm supposed to do it, versus this other thing that starts to emerge from within. That's organic. That's like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is, where I feel drawn, um, inspired. It's just a completely different way to approach, the way you operate in the world, and it's just awesome.
I think that's a great point, and I think that's why, if you look at the culture or the community insofar as it's represented on Twitter, which obviously is limited, that's why there's such a joyful playfulness, right? Like
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
joy and happiness in the community, and I think part of that is for the very reason you just articulated. It's like people's prior life is, you're born into the system, you're kind of forced down a funnel of doing things that you don't really find that meaningful, but it's the way to game the system that you find yourself in. And then you grow up and you kind of find yourself, I don't really like the way this system operates, as the more you learn about it. And then you feel bad about yourself because you're forced to conform to a system you don't believe in, right? That you don't think is right. And almost nothing could be more soul destroying than that. And I know, both myself and I've talked to a lot of people in previous careers or in previous jobs that they've had, that's the very way they characterize them, is soul destroying. It's like, I fucking hated getting up in the morning and going and doing that bullshit. But, what was I supposed to do? I'd spent this many years in school to do that. And I'd been, my family had kind of put me down this path, or my obligations, or, all that kind of stuff. And then to find this new system and to understand the principles on which it's predicated, and to see the culture emerging around it, and to be able to engage it, and then also to be able to use it to extricate yourself from the old one and make that transition to the new. And I'm not talking about like getting a job in Bitcoin. I just mean like using Bitcoin as a savings technology to, siphon off what you were able to build in that old system and bring it into this new one, and then empower you to continue kind of unpacking yourself so that you can get back to a place where you actually, both believe in the system and find meaning in the things you're doing, and therefore believe in yourself, and therefore feel happier, and therefore feel more joy. And that's why I think there's so much of that in this space, because like, it's like, fuck, rejoice. We've,
Yeah.
we've got something, we've got a better thing here now. We've got something that's principled, that's right, that's good, that can lead to the expression of, what we think is right and who we really are, and a fairer way of organizing all that stuff. Like, fucking Joyce, right?
Yeah. When you're free, like truly, if you've ever experienced like, the feeling of freedom in your life, if you're not, rejoicing and happy and having, fun with it, then you haven't felt it yet, because feeling free is that thing. You rejoice. And yeah, it's so sweet. I mean,
And
what you're saying.
that's why I take an issue with people that decry the toxicity, because I'm just like, man, you could not be further from the fucking truth. You are just blanking on this one hard, just because there's something in you that's resisting it.
Well, that, and it's not easy to deal with the jester, right? I mean,
Right.
It's not. The jester is, the jester is poignant, and pushes in a way that makes people uncomfortable. But there's always a bit of tongue in cheek, but it's razor sharp intelligence at the same time. The jester is so wise. So, I mean, I love it. I love it.
It's almost like, I've never thought of it in this way, but familiar with the character of the jester, but it's almost like the jester is like a tool for development, right? Because like,
Yeah.
the jester or the cyber hornets, right? If what they do offends you, that should be a signal to you. It's like, what about it in me is it triggering that I'm being offended by it, right? Because that's probably an indication that I need to unpack something, right? They're almost providing a service, like they're helping you mine yourself for the places where you haven't explored something maybe adequately. And I guess, the analogy of the jester is a apt one there.
Yeah, there's a reason why the jester was always so close to the king, right?
Right.
The king always kept the jester close.
The only one who could like really criticize him, sort of thing.
Yeah, criticize him and make him laugh at the same time and teach him.
I gotta look
Yeah.
more into that. I haven't looked into jesters very much, but
Well, the jester, the
sounds like I
Joker,
should.
right? I mean, it's a universal somehow. This theme of the Joker is the jester. Yeah, it's a really one of the great characters written of all time too. The Joker, the jester. But speaking about like what you were saying earlier, this thing of like, the Matrix is, the Matrix gets thrown around obviously in the zeitgeist, and Bitcoin reminds me of, it reminds me of the humanness involved in like, like what we were talking about before, the idea of the system, and if you sort of get involved in a system that you think you got to be on the treadmill, the wheel, and then suddenly you discover that maybe you don't, and like I like to see, or I think of like a human's life as like, it's very simple and very complicated, because we come into the world, and I have a 3-year-old now, a daughter, and she's teaching us so much, obviously, but you see that barring any unfortunate kind of traumatic event or anything, we come into the world, and we've got genius on tap. They're just so able to take everything in, and they're so aware of everything, and but they're also so extremely dependent, and it's really a unique. It's just a really unique thing, because we come into the world and we're kind of hardwired for survival, but in order to do so, we kind of have to look outward. Like we have to look at our parents or our caregivers or whatever, and we've got to adapt to them in order to survive. And so we're always looking outward, looking upward, towards the bigger human, the authority, the caregiver, to survive. And so it's kind of in us, it's kind of programmed into us. In order to survive, you got to be able to adapt to what's outside of you. And then as you get older, I mean, this was my experience, and that's why I'm sharing it. But as you get older and you start to sort of get your feet under you more, you might start to ask more questions. It depends on if you're lucky enough to have people around you that care about you and support you and whatnot, and don't make it too hard for you. I mean, sometimes when people, face really adverse stuff, they mutate, and they still make it, to the other side, but it's more difficult, I think. But yeah, if you get some support and you start to sort of have the space to ask your own questions, you start to sort of see that, oh, wait a second, I don't need to calibrate off what's going on outside of me. I actually don't need to look at the system and game the system. I mean, it doesn't happen for everybody. But something like Bitcoin, I think, actually is that truth wall that you can kind of bump into, and it can, like you said, it can affect you and maybe wake you to this thing that is like, I no longer have to look outside of myself for what I must do. And maybe I could find it within myself, and that was my journey. When I was in my 20s, I had so many questions about everything, and I had no answers. Like, I just couldn't get any answers about any of the questions. And it was difficult because, if you really do have questions about how things are and you really don't feel like there's answers out there, then you kind of got to find them for yourself in some ways. Like, and maybe not in some ways, you really do, and
or kind of give up, which a lot of people do also, which is a tragedy.
exactly. That's the other option, right? You abdicate and you just sort of fall in line. You fall into the system. You sort of say, you know what, whatever. I don't know if people do it consciously or not, but like my programming of like, other people know better, other people will guide me, authority will.
So much easier.
Yeah, it's easier, and it's in us, right? So it's almost like it's almost like you gotta you got to have a rebirth of some sort, I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but it and when you do, or if you do, it's intimidating, and it's kind of scary, I think, to go to say to oneself, like, no one has the answers. Like, I got to find them, I got to find them for myself.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think it's something that, sadly, has not up till this point prevailed in that many people. I think a lot of people take the comfortable route, the one that's known, right? Because it's so much harder to determine things for yourself when, a nicely packaged narrative is laid out for you when you enter into the world, and all you got to do is adopt it, and things become a lot more certain. And who doesn't like certainty, and who doesn't like comfort? And as you say, this idea, I've been reading a lot of Jordan Peterson stuff recently, and this idea of sacrifice, and it's not just like the grand sacrifice, it's a sacrifice on a daily basis of who you currently are and all the different associations and identities and perceptions that lead to you becoming that person, sacrificing that daily for who you might become with greater clarity, with a different perception, with more wisdom, with more knowledge, etc. And so that's kind of that's the behavior of the hero, is the one who shows up every time with the courage to sacrifice themselves for who they might be, right? For that, who's willing to place themselves in that uncomfortable position of uncertainty once again, just because they know that there's something better that lies beyond, that will be more truthful, be more clear, and be a more ultimately beneficial perspective for them in constructing a joyful, happy, truthful, righteous life. And I know that last word is fairly carries a lot of religious baggage, but that is the idea of the hero. And I think we could all relate to the courage that it takes. And we've been discussing this theme throughout this conversation so far, to show up and say, I don't know. And, and again, this happens on all scales constantly, but say, I'm willing to be the fool in order to, gain wisdom and gain knowledge as I move forward. And the courage to consistently be the fool is a genuine form of courage. And what I think about Bitcoin is that, I think it has the effect of being like a great deconditioning machine, almost, like we come in, as you said, to the world, and through our family and through our culture and stuff, we get inculcated with a great many things, right? And this is our conditioning, and this is why we think and speak and act in various ways different from culture to culture. And it almost seems like, in a way, Bitcoin is this thing that has its own first principles, right? These principles of, fairness and meritocracy and openness and incorruptibility and these sorts of things. Upon, that when people really start to understand it and go down that rabbit hole, almost serves to decondition a lot of things they were inculcated with, and built back up from those principles, from that place of maybe a more solid, maybe a more valid ground. And I again, I think this is part of the reason why we see these dramatic personal changes, because their perspective has been, they've been deconditioned to a certain degree, and then their perspective has been, fairly dramatically reoriented around these things. And I think the proof is in the pudding that that's probably a beneficial thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, if I share a bit of my personal side, it's like, I went up until my, mid-20s, and my whole world was about, like, what do other people think is good? What do others value? What do others esteem? And I followed that, and, I happened to be, pretty good at certain things. So I got really good at the things that I thought other people valued. And I think I was probably perceived, I mean, I can't say for sure, but I think I was probably perceived like, well, very, successful person, very good at this, very good at that. And I thought, this is the way. But I was always wondering, like, I always found myself kind of going like, there's got to be something else. I was always thinking there's got to be something else. And I built this, not to be critical of myself, but I didn't know any better, but I built this kind of like facade, of like who I was. And I think a lot of people admired me for it in some ways. And I was lucky enough, in my mid-20s to have a relationship end and feel like a ton of, just a ton of pain around the loss of a relationship. And it just cracked me. Like, it kind of, everything that I thought that I had kind of perfected and built up suddenly was just shaken up completely. And and then I started to, slowly begin my journey of like discovering it for myself. And it was painful. It was painful to kind of build something that, from the outside in, essentially, and then have it all fall apart and then have to like start again, with just questions. But yeah. And so I guess when I bumped into Bitcoin, I was like, oh, fuck, this is like, I don't know, it just resonated with me. And I think it's just something about the truth of it, the simple truth of it. Yeah. And I mean, I can't stop now. I can't stop. I'm so obsessed. Like, I'm one of those people, John, that's like, like I want to talk about it all the time, and it's like my family and friends, it's like, and they can see me sitting there being quiet and they're like, I know you just want to talk about Bitcoin, but we do it all the time. So, let's talk about something else. But, everything else kind of like pales, it just starts to pale. I used to read a bunch. I used to, watch a bunch of movies, I used to love stories. And now it's like I don't want to occupy my psychic space. I don't want anybody else telling me the stories anymore. It's like, I just value my time so much now, more than ever. And I just don't want it. I want to be in charge of my time and my psychic space. And, and Bitcoin just keeps scratching me where I itch. So I'm grateful.
Well, I think we all suffer from that affliction. Like we find ourselves in a social environment and we're sitting around with 5 or 6 friends and they're talking about God knows what, current pop culture item or politics or whatever, and we're all just there like sitting on our hands shaking like, somebody ask me about Bitcoin right now. And then of course when we get to connect with Bitcoiners, then we get to let it all flow out, which is a primary reason why I do this pod. But it's such a great point that bears repeating, that you mentioned just before that, about how you came out of a relationship and your world kind of came crashing down. And like, because the big question here is like, why the fuck is this thing having that kind of like the effect that we've been articulating on people?
Yeah.
Right. And I think part of it, when we talk about conditioning, when we talk about culture, and we talk about identity, and we talk about beliefs, and a relationship is probably a good little microcosm of that, because you think something of this person, you see a future with this person, you believe something about them, and then when it falls apart, like all that is taken away, and it requires a fairly dramatic reorientation of at least a part of your reality, which was who you spent most of your time with and why you did that and what you saw in terms of the future. So like, and I think that it makes you feel naked, or at least vulnerable, for a period of time, right? Because like a big chunk of your identity, and of course we construct our identities to feel comfortable about moving through the world, right? To feel enough certainty and confidence to have enough of a grasp on who we are and what this world is, so that we can actually try to manipulate it in some way to our benefit. That gets taken away, and we're like, oh shit, like I'm vulnerable right now. I gotta fill up that chunk that's just been removed with something else that's going to deliver to me the requisite stability to keep performing that magic function of manipulating my world, of engaging reality in a way that ends up being beneficial to me. And I think in a broader context, like you follow this all the way down, and you end up at religious or deeply philosophical principles. And again, to refer to Peterson as, and most, I think a lot of religious scholars would say the same. It's like, it's fine that we have, the world seems to be predominantly, or at least a growing contingent of atheism today. But the principles that are found in the religious stories are still very much a part of how they construct their worldview, whether they like it or not, or whether they know it or not. But we don't need to open that can of worms. We can just simply say that, like, there are fundamental principles, and then upon those are more principles and more beliefs and perspectives and things that you associate your identity with in order to become that functional person that's able to engage with the world for whatever ends, right? And in most cases, it'll be, a motivation of something in the future, right? Like you want your life to be a certain way, you want something in your life. And yeah, when that gets rug pulled, I think that's why it's so uncomfortable, because like it's literally the stuff that you are relying on to be a person in this chaotic, crazy, uncertain world. And it seems like Bitcoin is speaking to those elements at the very, foundational layer of those things, right? So like, for example, our sports team may be part of our identity. Like maybe you support the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that, you cheer for them and you hang out with your buddies and drink beers. And when the team wins, you're happy. And when they lose, you're sad. Like that's a part of your identity, albeit maybe not an important one, but not an unimportant one either. But certainly not as important as the more foundational ones about, kind of how your perception of reality is constructed and construed. And it seems like Bitcoin is like knocking at that door on that level of things, because how could you make a case that it's not, when it's inspiring these types of changes in how people see things and how people feel things and the meaning people ascribe to things, and look, I know we're having this conversation because we want to dig into this stuff. I know a lot of people might listen and think like, it's way overboard, but we got to focus in on the element we're trying to explore and then expand it in order to do it justice. And so I know this doesn't apply to everybody, but it seems to be a very fundamental thing that's being changed here, right? Like on a very deep level.
Yeah. And I mean, not to crack open the can of worms that is, a discussion about religion, but like I think I think
crack it open if you want.
Yeah, sure. I'll crack it open. I'll crack it open a little. Which is like, I'm obviously we're all speaking from our own subjective place, right? And my experience, thus far in my life, and I'm always open to be humbled and changed, but so far it's like I've had to discover it for myself, basically, and again, it ties back to Bitcoin, this thing of self-sovereignty, but like whatever things that I feel that are, quote unquote divine, it's like I've had to discover them for myself. I can't take anybody's word for it. I just, I just couldn't do that. And it never felt right to me to take anyone's sort of thought or even someone else's experience. I had to find for myself, like, this feeling of like something other, something bigger, something divine, and yeah, and I guess I value it because it kind of is the, one of the sort of, I guess, bedrocks for me, about how I operate and how I feel about life. But it's mine. It's not anybody else's. And I think that's why it feels so good to me, and so strong to me. I'm talking a little esoterically here, but it is kind of esoteric, it's individual.
Before you go on, are you moving back and forth away from your mic? Because
Oh, maybe. You're kind of, was I coming in and out?
You're coming in and out a little bit.
Yeah, see, I'm getting too philosophical. I got to tweak my head left and right here.
No, but I mean, look, this is what these sorts of conversations are for, and like it's uncertain territory, right? So all we can do is really fumble around and try to, dig within ourselves and pull out some words that make any sense of all this stuff, because like even allowing yourself to believe that things are operating on that level with this thing is like a stretch, right? You're kind of sheepish about it. Like, am I really going to allow myself to go there, to and certainly go there in public, to suggest that like what we're dealing with here is like a again, word with a lot of baggage, but like a religious instrument, something with that level, that order of influence on who we are and how we act and how we ascribe and convey meaning, right? And like that's a bold assertion, obviously. Yeah. But it just, again, I mean, again, that's why I want to put together this series, because like I want to open that door about like why this is causing people to change in such fundamental ways. But I would like to ask you, you're saying like you've always been kind of searching for your own truth, and you didn't want to, accept or swallow one that was handed down to you, whether it be religious or cultural or philosophical or spiritual or whatever. Like, do you have any sense of why that is, like why it was you wanted to discover it for yourself?
Well, because of that sort of transformative experience I had in my 20s, where it's like everything that I built sort of from the outside in crumbled. And then I had no choice in some ways. Like in some ways I had no choice to discover for myself, because I felt so, I don't know, like the thing that I built was gone. And so then what was left? Mm-hmm. And all really that, that was left for me was like I said, questions, and then just this sort of painful feeling of like loss, like that I'd lost, that I'd lost something. And it was just very painful. And not to fucking toot my own horn or whatever, but maybe one of the things I'm most proud of is that at that time in my life, when I was feeling so much pain, that for what I think because, I had supportive family and whatnot, but I managed not to like, hit the booze and, or hit drugs or, sleep around a ton. Not at all, actually. And for whatever reason, some part of me knew that the pain that I was going through was essential. I don't know how, whatever. I just, somehow I knew, and I knew I didn't want to hide from it because, yeah, I don't know. We're going down a different kind of rabbit hole here, but somehow it's connected. And yeah,
hey man, I'm good with it if you are.
Yeah,
I don't want you to go anywhere you're not.
No, I'm good. I'm good. I just, whatever. I'm good. No, it's good.
Let's hit it.
But it was just, it was just the thing where somehow inside of me, I knew that if I didn't deal with this pain now, it was going to be with me no matter what. And so, yeah, I just, it was years of just dealing with this. I don't know. Fuck, it's weird. It's hard to describe, but just this uncomfortable, painful kind of a feeling. And I had an unwillingness to kind of hide from it. And I think it shaped, again, I don't know, fuck, knock on wood, but I think it shaped my years to come, after that, when I was able to emerge finally. And it just happened it took quite a bit of time, but yeah, I just remember going like, I can't booze it. I just can't do it. And I can't, chase these girls because, I just can't. This pain is somehow important and it's going to teach me something, and I got to stick with it, even though it was brutal. And I don't know. I mean, there's people go through way more painful shit than, and so I don't pretend that it's some kind of noble thing or whatever, but it was mine, and it was, for me, it was real and potent.
Well,
So
it's definitely noble, at least in my opinion, not to seek the most expedient way out of a situation like that. Right. So girls, drugs, booze, whatever, something else to occupy your time and your mind, like to know that there's a reason why the circumstance is making you feel so uncomfortable, right? And so fill in the blank emotions. And the way to solve that, optimally, if not for good, but the way to solve it, let's say the correct way, is not just to cover it over, right? It's like it's an indication that something needs to be addressed. And
let it run its course.
Yeah. And I think it's like again, back to the courage notion. Like, I think that's a courageous act, for people to say, like, for people to accept pain, right? For people to say, like,
yeah,
I'm going to put up with this pain because I know on the other side of it, there is something better. There is something right. And it's kind of, that idea of the immolation, right? The burning off of, all the detritus, or the of who you are, of your identity, of your perspective, that's not serving you, or that's founded in delusion or fear or insecurity or what have you, and remaining that which is true, right? And like, I don't know if we can ever exist in pure truth with absolute clarity, with a clear perspective, all that kind of stuff, the enlightened, as it were. But it does seem that you can at least identify ways to creep toward that, right? By sacrificing those elements of yourself that aren't serving you, and hanging out in that uncomfortable area of pain and discomfort and vulnerability, while you search for the things that are most truthful about yourself to then integrate and move forward with, right? That, I mean, that's the hero's journey. And so many people swerve on that. And again, like, I can't help but think that Bitcoin, being what it is, as a certain form of truth, and also something that permits certain behaviors, is not only kind of delivering a certain sense of clarity to people's perspectives, and allowing them to maybe construct a new perspective on better principles, but again, is that idea of confidence, is like giving them something, like almost like something that stands behind them, to say, like, this is a sense of security, right? Like, no matter, like, if you can kind of rely on it to move forward with more confidence, because it's a sense of security that perhaps you never had before. And because we're always in normie land, like, a lot of people are in the situation where, let's say, they're paycheck to paycheck, or even if they're not, their obligations, their house and their car and their family obligations, all that stuff, are pretty much equivalent to what's coming in, right? So as you say, they're always on that hamster wheel, and they too many responsibilities to shirk on, and it just ends up making them feel like they're a bit trapped, right? And that they can't sacrifice those elements of their self that they might, or they can't explore themselves in the ways that they might, because of that. And Bitcoin seems to be bestowing a certain sense of security that pushes into the future, that is, that giving people a greater sense that, like, yeah, maybe I can dig into those things a little bit more, and it's not going to be disastrous to me or my situation or my family, because of the security that Bitcoin provides.
Yeah, and it's again sort of what we touched on earlier. It's like agency and empowerment, right? And that's why the deep dive into money is so important. Money gets such a bad rap in so many narratives, but if you deep dive into money, you realize that it's just value. It's the value that you create and store, basically. And this thing, this Bitcoin thing, it's about, it instills kind of like agency and empowerment, because whatever you do becomes yours.
Yeah.
And that
stays yours, right? Importantly,
it's so powerful. It's so powerful. You can't underestimate the power of when you do something, it's yours. And not only that, but that's also very intimidating, John, because then you kind of like, and I get why people in some ways, like, they push off of Bitcoin, because you got to then face, like, okay, then it's me. It's my responsibility. It's mine. It's mine. There's no excuses. There's no somebody else's. It's ownership, and that's uncomfortable. It can be very uncomfortable to not have an idea as to why not, when it's yours now. What are you going to do? That's a difficult thing to embrace in some ways, taking that responsibility.
Absolutely. And it kind of, there's so many interesting parallels of Bitcoin to esoteric topics and religion and stuff like that. But that, what you just said makes me think of the idea of what the philosopher's stone in alchemy, right?
Yeah.
And which was that the seeking of the philosopher's stone was the process of the individual purification, right, of the person who was seeking it and attempting to construct it. There's a very obvious parallel with Bitcoin. Is like the more you understand it and the more you engage it and the more you integrate it and leverage the potential and possibilities that it represents, the more it seems to require your transformation. And if not require, certainly the propensity to inspire it seems to exist. And chalk another one up for like just a bizarre sort of element of this thing, but
Yeah, I mean,
it seems unavoidable.
It does, and absolutes. I mean, I'm never, I'm never too keen on like, throwing out absolutes. But man, this thing's got like, yeah, this thing's got legs. It's
let me ask you a question. And I don't think this is going to happen, but of course it's possible. And when there's so much hope and reliance on something, it's a necessary thought exercise, I think. What happens if it goes away, right? It fails, bug in the code, state attack. Like, we don't have to go into the validity of the FUD. I just mean philosophically speaking, like if it goes away, how does that affect you, would you think?
a great question. I mean, I don't know for sure. Hopefully we don't find out. But if I was to hazard a guess, I don't know, something. I mean, it had such an incredible beginning. I mean, you're stumping me here. I want to say it's not going away, but for me, I don't know what would happen. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the results would be. I don't think the process would change much, though. Like the thing in me that has and continues to embrace that, like I gotta create something, that I'm creating my world, that I'm creating my life. I don't think that's going away. I don't care. I just don't see a bug going into that code. So that's going to stay, and it would be great, if the tools were out there that sort of aligned and supported that. But that in me is not going away. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, I mean, there's no right answer. Obviously, I mean, something. I'm just as wrapped up in this as anyone, and so I asked myself that question, and it would obviously be devastating, and I think it would remove the element of hope that Bitcoin represents is incredibly powerful, and I think more powerful than maybe a lot of people appreciate. And if that's removed, that would be difficult. But one of the things that I think I would take some solace in is that I've already connected with so many great people that were brought together by this thing. And if the tool went away, that would be devastating, and those people would be far less capable of advancing the cause that they were a part of and building what they wanted to build, because we derive a lot of obviously power and benefit from having this tool, and it's sucking all of us in. And when that goes away, maybe there'd be some dispersion and despondence, and and obviously less effective means of pursuing what seems to be a coalescence of certain principles and goals in the quote unquote community. But still having identified a lot of having leveraged that tool to identify a lot of people that line up on similar things and are pursuing certain ideas, maybe chief among them truth, is, would still be a blessing, and hopefully, something would come out of that nevertheless. But
Definitely. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist. I don't know. I guess maybe in some ways I always have been, and I know that Bitcoin is just channeling what's already there. You know what I mean?
sure, I mean,
Like
well,
it.
it's just behavior at the end of the day, right? I mean, it's still
Yeah.
just us. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's a really funny thing, right? Because we could act in many ways, like we could have always acted as though Bitcoin existed, right? But just the thing is, like, at scale, we don't, right? We don't trust each other enough. We don't. The constraints on our behavior are such that people bend and break them, and the more people that bend and break them, the more people that bend and break them further. Um, but you're right. I mean, all of this is just behavior, and it's just that this thing is kind of establishing new parameters for that behavior. And I guess we're agreeing that those are good parameters and they're useful parameters, and we want to try to optimize them.
Yeah. This stuff's it's like I said, it's behavior that's already there. It's mojo that's already there, and for whatever reason, this Bitcoin is it's channeling it, and like to answer your question again, if it went down, if it went down, it would suck. But I think that something else would, another tool would emerge at some point. And again, my eternal optimism is that, that things when things get bad, they get bad because they're going to get good again, and it's a bit of the fourth turning thing, where, yeah, I just have this sort of profound sense that, and I guess that's what keeps me pretty happy and pretty optimistic about everything and pretty hopeful about everything, is that I think that every time when things turn down and turn dark, the old darkest before the dawn, it's like, it's necessary, it's necessary to emerge. And, yeah, so things for me they're always going to end up with, a rebirth and a new thing and, something brighter. So I say that with this sort of like ominous, dark voice, but no, it's a very, it's a beautiful thing, that whatever, it's weird. I mean, I feel lucky as shit, so it's kind of easy for me to say, but yeah, I always had that. I always had that sort of sense that when things get bad, it's just because they got to get bad in order to get good, something like
Yeah.
that.
Well, hopefully we can avoid the extent to which things get bad as a result of Bitcoin being in the mix now, because we certainly have a lot of instances where things got pretty fucking bad. So
Yeah.
if we can mitigate how deep down we go, that would be a good thing. But dude, I know you're on a schedule, but I did want to ask you, this has all been pretty 10,000 feet at this point, but since getting involved in Bitcoin, like, are there material or concrete or identifiable things that have changed in, like, your day-to-day life, as a result of, let's say, this reorientation of perspective that we've been exploring?
Sell everything, baby. Just sell it. Sell it all. You don't need any of this shit. Look around you. You don't need any.
What do you mean? You just distill everything into sats? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. No, it's like distill is a great word. Like it's just another sort of piece in my life where, like, oh yeah, it's just another mirror saying, like, asking me, like, what's important to me? Like, is this shit important to me? And most of the time, it just helped me distill down, like, what I value, basically. It put me in tune with, like, value itself, and then made me go, what do I value? Like, what's really important to me? And the stuff that, may have preoccupied my time and my attention before just slowly starts to just erode. It's hard to describe why or how it happens, but I just started to sort of say, like, what's important to me? What's important to me? I'm a dad now, I'm a husband now. I've got this partnership. I got this little one that I'm raising. I've got my family and my friends. I got my health. I want to be happy, healthy, and full of energy for as long as I can. It's like, what are the things that are most important to me? I love being in nature. I love time. I love just having time. So anything that didn't fit with this, and this, it's continually evolving picture of like, what makes my life feel good to me? How is my life valuable to me? And that, and that's not to say it's a totally selfish thing, right? Because helping other people, being with other people, um, you know, I mean, again, it sounds a little trite, but like helping others, like I like it. Like when I can, offer something to someone else, like I benefit, so, I'm big into, for lack of a better way of describing it, I'm big into selfishness. Like, and maybe we in the community or whatever, people call it more like sovereignty or whatever, but like there's something important about like a degree of selfishness. Like what do I want? What's important to me? Like, what do I want my life to be like, and so, Bitcoin's just really helped me distill those things down even further. And man, when I, busted my own node and, got my cold card going and, got my multi-sig, and it's just a weird feeling to be like, this is mine. Like I'm doing this, I'm holding this value. No one's going to get to it. No one's diluting it, literally, figuratively. It's like, it feels good. Like it just feels good to be, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but it's something about this feeling of empowerment and agency, and, yeah. And I feel it more and more every day, and it helps me distill down more and more every day. And, again, I just feel so grateful for it. It's just another thing. And, I'm looking forward to what's ahead because, there's so much that still don't know what's coming, but, it feels good to sit and be, sit and listen to this thing, listen to what's coming, make intuitive choices. Like, more specifically, like we made some, kind of big choices. We sold where we were living. We sold out of there. We left the city. Even like I got a bit of a career change going now that's sort of beginning again. And, just trying to embrace like going with what feels right now, throwing away the blueprint and just kind of feeling intuitively, like, creatively, like what am I going to do now? Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, it's all coincided with Bitcoin somehow. So, I'm digging it. Sell
Man,
everything, baby. Just sell it.
that sounds like a phenomenal place to put a pin on this thing. So, yeah, unless you have any final comments, man, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and of course, I appreciate you being so open and sharing your thoughts and your experiences, and how this has impacted you.
Yeah, man. I mean, ditto for me. I've listened to you for a long time now, and, I'm grateful to be just having the convo with you. You're doing great stuff, and, it's it's important, how we communicate with one another, and how we are to one another like this, our conversation, and many others that I've had, and, hopefully we'll keep having. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's hard to describe it, but yeah, it's just
How you communicate is almost more important than what's being communicated. That's kind of how I've been characterizing it.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And that, John, we could go down a whole new rabbit hole with that. Like, and it's stuff. Maybe we'll do it again at some point. But this theme that you just brought up, how you communicate versus what you communicate, epic. It's just epic. So yeah, maybe we'll do it again at some point. But
let's do it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's been a blast.
You get on, but I'll hit you up again, and we'll dive back in.
Sounds great.
All right, brother. Take care of yourself.
All right, brother. See you.
Cheers.